Hey everyone, my name is Nick Chamberlain, and welcome to the NCC Audio YouTube channel. And in today's episode, we are going to be going over what's the difference between editing, mixing, and mastering your podcast. Let's find out. So, editing, mixing, and mastering is the post-production process for editing your podcast. So, this is after you recorded your podcast. So, what is editing, and how is that different from mixing and mastering? All right, let me show you. So in editing, you will go through your podcast and you'll listen to it and you'll take out everything that you want to take out and you will move everything around and you will format your podcast into the podcast it wants to be. So usually this is removing likes, and so pretty much any verbal hiccup that you want to remove, and or if you just want to delete entire sections of your podcast. And so usually you just find some section. So there's a so. Maybe I don't want the so. So editing is going through, deleting those, and then removing the gaps. So you have a nice flow to your podcast so it sounds great. And there's a lot to learn with editing. It can be very tedious. Just listening to the whole thing, closing gaps. Look at all this. This is the exciting life of a podcast editor. But then you get to learn special tricks. Like, let's say I want to delete this and I want to close that gap and I want to make a crossfade all at once. Well, good thing there's a hotkey for that. Boom, it does a little stuff like that and it made a little crossfade. And so you can get really quick at all these special editing tricks. Look at that. Look at that little edit right there. Yep, that is editing. You're going through the podcast and you're taking out everything that you don't like to make it sound great. So what's mixing then? I'm glad you asked. Let's find out. So mixing is when you take all of the elements in your podcast and you put it together so it sounds great. This includes all the dynamic processing. On my file, I'm going to need I pull up my dynamics. I'm probably going to add some gate. I'm going to add a compressor. I'm going to do those kind of things. I'm not going to get into what those do in this video. That's for later videos. So basically, mixing is going through, adjusting the level. Oh, that's so loud right there. Oh, it's too quiet right there. And you can do it here in this using the keyframes here, or you use plugins such as your compressor, which I'll go over in different videos, and all the way to using de-essers. Where is that de-esser? Using de-essers to remove your S sounds, to using parametric equalizers like this one, and this will change the tonal quality of your voice. So if you have, a loud room tone that's like super muddy, you can just kind of knock it out, lower it. Make your voice less muddy. Roll off some low ends, brighten it up a bit, and use things like hard limiters. Or you could even use something like a multi-band compressor. So basically the mixing process is making sure you have all your dynamics sounding great. So nothing's too loud or nothing's too quiet. And another aspect of mixing is putting all the show elements together. So your intro music, your voiceover, any sound effects you have, and blending them together into a final product so it sounds great. So here I have my music. It's clipping. And there you can see I lowered the music and I have a nice little fade out so it sounds natural. So that's part of the mixing process, is putting everything together so it sounds great. So at the end of your podcast, you'll have a bunch of edits like this and all the processing will be done on your file and you'll have your music, your sound effects, and everything so it sounds great. All right, so what is mastering? Mastering is when you take all of your clips that have been edited, have all the dynamic processing, all the equalization that you have to make it sound great, and then you bounce down all of these elements into a new track. And so now when you add all of your final equalization, all your final dynamics, and you check the loudness of your final file, this is mastering. So let me show you, for example. I'm going to check some of these statistics. And here we have -22 LUFS. For a mastered file for podcasting, I'd like to have this around -18 to -16. If you read Apple's specifications, they're asking that it's around -16 LUFS. But sometimes it's loud enough at -18. So here I would go through and add some more processing to get it to around -16 LUFS. And the final process of mastering is turning your audio file into an MP3 so it's ready to go for Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your other popular podcast platforms. So what kind of format do you need? You need an MP3. You need to be 44.1 kilohertz or 44,100 hertz. Same thing. It needs to be stereo or mono, doesn't really matter, and 16-bit. And the format settings is right here, MP3 128 kbps. And this is the file that you'll upload to your podcast hosting service. So your podcast can be heard on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those other special podcast platforms. And you can put it on your website and share it on social media. And if you're interested in starting your own podcast and you want a little more in-depth knowledge on microphones, audio interfaces, and anything else that might pertain to starting a podcast, you can go ahead and download my Jumpstart Guide to Podcasting found in the show description below. And of course, if you found this video helpful and you would like to learn more about podcast editing and get some new tips and tricks on how to become a better podcast editor and to learn how to make your podcast sound better, please subscribe and like this video. Thank you so much. And that's it. Okay, bye. Oh, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below and I will answer them. Alrighty, cool.